One phrase from a millionaire. How it changed my life forever and made my pride rise from my knees. Then my life turned upside down and he. Before we start, leave a comment and indicate which city you are sharing from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. They say dignity is silent. But that day mine was caught on camera, loud, raw, undeniable. It happened during the lunch rush. The kind of day where your shoes stick to the floor. And the air smells like burnt bacon and anxiety. I was balancing 3 trays, eggs, pancakes, coffee, when the voice hit me like a slap. Hey you, girl. I turned, already feeling the blood drain from my face. The man snapping his fingers at me was Leonard Blake. Yes, that Leonard Blake. Billionaire investor. Magazine cover regular. Arrogant jerk with a gold Rolex and a god complex. And unfortunately, a regular at the downtown bistro where I worked double shifts. He was seated at table 6, surrounded by his usual group of suit-and-tie parasites. They were laughing. Not the happy kind of laugh, but the kind that stings. I walked over, smile tight, head high. Yes, sir? I asked. He didn't look at me. He just shoved his empty plate toward me like I was a stray dog. This is cold, he said. What kind of dump is this? Don't y'all teach your people how to use a microwave? I froze. My hands shook. Not from fear, at least not just from fear, but from the humiliation. Everyone heard. Tables went quiet. I could feel their stares cutting through me like heat. Before I could speak, he added with a sneer. Is this what passes for service where you come from, sweetheart? Or is this just one of those diversity hires? There it was. I felt every eye in the room on me, waiting, hoping I'd yell, cry, run, break. But I didn't. I inhaled slow and deep. My mother always said, don't let them drag you down to where they already are. Stay taller. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Blake, I said clearly. Would you like me to reheat the food? Or bring you something else? A few jaws dropped. His friends laughed nervously. One of them even muttered, Geez, Leonard, easy. But he wasn't done. You're lucky I'm not in the mood to sue this place for emotional trauma. What kind of back alley did they pull you out of? That's when I said it. The line I didn't plan, didn't even think, just felt. Actually, Mr. Blake, I said, meeting his eyes now. I have a degree from Howard University, speak 3 languages, and this dump paid my way through graduate school. But if you'd like me to bring you some ketchup to go with your inflated ego, I'd be happy to. The room gasped. I set the tray down, nodded once, and walked away. What I didn't realize in that moment, what I couldn't have imagined, was that someone had filmed the entire thing. From his first insult to my last word. And within hours the video was everywhere. Millions watched. Millions commented. Some praising, some attacking. I became a hashtag. A target. A symbol. I was suspended from work for causing disruption. I received death threats in my inbox and flowers at my door. Reporters followed me home. People I hadn't heard from in years called to say, I saw you on the news. Everyone wanted something. A comment. A reaction. A breakdown. But I stayed quiet. Until Rachel, our restaurant owner, called me in. I saw the video, she said. I'm sorry I didn't stop it sooner. She was crying. I want to do more than apologize, she said. I want to start a program for workers like you. People who are overlooked, mistreated. I want you to run it. I stared at her, stunned. That's how it started. That's how I went from being the girl who brought pancakes and side-eye to the woman on CNN talking about systemic injustice in the service industry. But with the spotlight came darkness too. Harassment. Lawsuits. Online lies. And the man who started it all? Leonard Blake? He lost everything. His sponsors dropped him. His board forced him out. His smug face, once printed in Forbes, was now plastered in scandal. Sometimes I think back to that day in the diner. The sound of his voice. The sting of his words. And I remember something my grandmother told me when I was 10. Dignity, she said, isn't what you're given. It's what you hold on to, even when the world tries to take it away. I didn't break that day, but something else did. A wall. A silence. And maybe, just maybe, a cycle. They say fame is a spotlight, but sometimes it feels more like a fire. The morning after the video exploded online, I woke up to over 1,200 unread messages. My phone was overheating. My inbox was chaos. My face, tired, stunned, defiant, was everywhere. People started calling me a hero. They didn't know me. And the ones who did, they were either calling to say how proud they were, or how reckless I'd been. My landlord, who hadn't smiled at me in 6 months, now offered to lower my rent. A coffee shop I used to get kicked out of for studying too long now posted Black-owned ally signs in the window. But just beneath the praise came the clause. I hope you get fired, you race-baiting douche. Go back to where you came from. She's making it all about color. Again. I'd seen this before. Every viral moment comes with its shadow. And I was now in that shadow. Rachel, the restaurant owner, called me back in after my suspension. She met me in her office, small, cluttered, warm like her spirit. They want me to fire you, she said, voice tight. Who? I asked. Investors. Our PR team. A few regulars threatened to boycott. I nodded. I wasn't surprised. But I'm not firing you, she continued. I watched the video again and again. You were calm, polite, strong. I should have stepped in. I didn't. That's on me. For the first time in days, I felt my chest loosen just a little. Then she slid a folder across the desk. This is what I want to do. A workplace equity initiative. Starting here. With us. With you. I opened the folder. Workshops. Policy changes. Legal guidance. Education. And one line that caught me off guard. Director of Worker Advocacy. Jasmine Bennett. My name. In print. With a title. I don't even know where to start, I whispered. Rachel smiled. Start by standing. That's what you've already done. That night, I stood in my tiny studio apartment, staring out at the city. It looked different now, like it was watching me, waiting. I didn't sleep much, because while Rachel stood beside me, Leonard Blake's people started pushing back. First came the statements. Mr. Blake regrets the misunderstanding. A private moment taken out of context. He has always been a generous supporter of urban employment opportunities. Then came the smear campaign. They dug up an old video of me at a college protest, framed it like I was some radical agitator. They released doctored screenshots that made it look like I called for violence. Trolls flooded my socials digging for dirt. When none surfaced, they made some up. My email was hacked. My sister's phone was pinged with threats. Even Rachel got messages warning her to drop the activist waitress. Still, I kept going, because something had changed in me. I was no longer serving coffee to the wealthy. I was serving truth to the people who had been invisible like me. The cooks, the cashiers, the janitors, the single moms on graveyard shifts. One by one, I started getting letters. Handwritten notes slipped under my door. Emails from strangers. I saw you and cried. Thank you. You stood up, and I felt like I could breathe again. One letter came from a girl named Sierra in Detroit. 17. High school dropout. Worked at a chain diner where a man called her the N-word and no one did anything. She wrote, "But I saw your video. And now I know I'm not crazy. And I'm not alone." That letter broke me open. Because I had been her. And I would have given anything to have someone like me to believe in, back when I was serving tables and biting my tongue bloody. But the more visibility I got, the louder the threats became. They left a dead rat at the restaurant entrance. Spray-painted the word liar on the side of my apartment building. Someone even sent me a message with just a noose emoji and my full address. I called the police. They filed a report. Nothing happened. But Rachel? She stepped up again. She hired a lawyer. She added cameras. She made it clear, I wasn't alone. "You're not just a worker, Jasmine," she said. "You're the spark. They're afraid of what comes next if more women like you speak up." What came next was unexpected. A foundation in New York reached out. They wanted to fund the advocacy program, bring it to a national level. They asked me to come speak on stage. A TED-style talk. "Your story is powerful," the woman on the phone said, "and we want to help you tell it." I hung up the call and stared at the empty kitchen I once cried in after 10-hour shifts. The place where I'd warmed ramen for dinner and whispered apologies to my exhausted reflection. Now they wanted to hear my voice. All of it. And I would give it to them. But I knew something else too. Leonard Blake wasn't done. He had money, influence. He'd already filed a defamation suit. He was losing endorsements. His empire was collapsing, and people like him didn't go quietly. They retaliate. And I was the target. Still, I stood in front of my mirror that night and said the words out loud for the first time. My name is Jasmine Bennett. I am not ashamed. I am not afraid. And I am not going away. The first time I walked into a law office wearing heels, I felt like an imposter. Not because I didn't belong, but because I had spent so long convincing myself I didn't. The firm Rachel connected me with was run by a woman named Camille Haynes, a civil rights lawyer with nerves of steel and eyes that missed nothing. When I entered the sleek downtown office with its glass walls and espresso machines, I felt the weight of every diner uniform I'd ever worn pressing against my spine. Camille rose from her chair and smiled. Jasmine Bennett, she said like she already knew me. You've made quite the mess. I blinked. I didn't mean to. She laughed gently. Good, because it's the right kind of mess. That day we went through everything. The threats. The lawsuit Leonard Blake filed against me for intentional defamation and reputational harm. The fake accounts trying to ruin my credibility. The waves of media spin. Camille listened, took notes, and finally said, We'll counterfile. Libel, targeted harassment, false accusations, and racial discrimination. And Jasmine? Yes. Don't back down. You have more leverage than you realize. That night I got a call from someone I never expected. Ms. Bennett, the voice asked. Yes. This is Miles Carter. I work with the Workers' Equity Council. We'd like to invite you to Washington. I blinked. Washington. We'd like you to speak before the Subcommittee on Labor Equity. Your story has reached a lot of people. They're listening. And we think it's time your voice entered the record. I didn't know what to say. For a second I was back in that diner, table 6, watching my tray tremble under Leonard's insults. And now they wanted me on Capitol Hill? When I hung up the phone, I sat on my bed for almost 20 minutes without moving. The silence around me felt holy. My mama's old rosary beads hung on the doorknob. The calendar still showed the same date as the day the video first went viral. The world was moving faster than I could breathe. But deep down I knew I had to go. Rachel helped me prepare. Camille prepped my speech with brutal honesty and careful clarity. Even my landlord left a note outside my door. Make us proud. I boarded a train to DC 3 days later. And when I stepped onto that marble floor in the Rayburn building, I felt something strange. Not fear. Power. They put me in a small waiting room with 2 interns and a carafe of lukewarm coffee. A security guard nodded as he passed. I straightened my blazer, borrowed from Rachel, and practiced the first line of my speech. Then the doors opened. The committee sat behind a long mahogany desk. Suits, ties, microphones, nameplates. I was led to the center table, a name tag in front of me. Ms. Jasmine Bennett. The chairwoman spoke first. Ms. Bennett, thank you for being here. We've read your testimony and reviewed the footage. We're grateful you chose to share your experience. I nodded. My throat was tight. My palms were damp. But when I opened my folder and looked down at the words I'd written, everything stilled. And I spoke. I told them about the day Leonard Blake humiliated me. I told them how calm I had to stay. I told them about the years of invisible labor, being spoken over, blamed, ignored. The quiet racism. The loud one. I told them about how I built dignity from scraps. When I finished, the room was silent. One congressman shifted in his chair. A woman on the panel wiped her eye discreetly. The chairwoman leaned forward. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Your words have been heard. And your strength noted. That evening, I stepped outside into the DC sunset. The sky was painted in orange and gold, like fire meeting peace. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. We saw your speech. Not everyone is happy. Watch your back. I stared at the screen. And then I deleted the message. I was done being afraid. The night I returned from Washington, something felt off. My apartment door was unlocked. I was sure I'd double-locked it before I left. I always did. Habit from growing up in a place where safety was more hope than guarantee. I stood in the hallway for a second. Keys clenched in my hand like a weapon, listening. Silence. Then I pushed the door open. Everything looked untouched, mostly. except the frame on my nightstand. It was turned face down. The photo of my mother and me after graduation. The only real picture I had of her. I turned it back up with shaking hands. That night I didn't sleep. I kept the light on and the kitchen knife under my pillow. Camille came by the next morning with a private investigator and a former police officer she trusted. They swept the apartment. No cameras. No bugs. Just intimidation. They want you scared, Camille said. They want you to quit. But they're panicking, Jasmine. Because you're winning. Winning didn't feel like this. Felt like a war. The national attention had brought both support and enemies. News outlets invited me to interviews. Podcasts called. Think tanks asked me to consult. But for every opportunity there were 5 messages that read, "Stay in your place. No one wants to hear your sob story. Next time we won't just move your picture." I didn't tell Rachel about the break-in. Not right away. She had enough to handle. The advocacy program was now in its 2nd week. We'd started hosting after-hours training sessions, mostly for service workers, restaurant staff, small business employees. People who'd seen things, endured things, but never had the words or space to say them. One night, during a workshop on conflict resolution, a young woman stood up. Her name was Alyssa. She worked the night shift at a hotel chain. "I was called a slur by a guest 2 weeks ago," she said, voice shaking. "And my manager told me to apologize to him so we wouldn't lose the business." Everyone in the room froze. I asked her gently, "What did you do?" She looked at me, eyes burning. "I quit. And I've been terrified ever since." I took a slow breath. "Do you regret it?" She wiped her eyes. "No. But I feel erased. Like it never happened. Like I never mattered." That's when I realized the real weight of what we were building. It wasn't just about me. It was about the people who couldn't go viral. The ones who left silently. Who cried in walk-in freezers or bathroom stalls. I walked up to Alyssa, put my hand on her shoulder and said, "You mattered. And you still do." That moment made the headlines the next morning. Someone from the press had been attending the workshop anonymously. They wrote an article titled, "The Waitress Who Won't Stay Quiet, Jasmine Bennett's Quiet Revolution." It went viral again. And so did the backlash. That night, someone keyed the word liar across Rachel's car. She found it the next morning and didn't even flinch. She walked into the restaurant, tied on her apron, and told me, "They're trying to scare us. Let them try harder." But I knew things were escalating. That evening as I walked home, a black SUV crept slowly behind me for 2 blocks before peeling off. I changed my route, took alleys, checked over my shoulder at every corner. That was the night Camille insisted I leave the apartment. "You're staying with me," she said, "no room for argument. And we're hiring full-time protection." I moved into her guest room that night. It felt strange. Living in a place with silent floors and fresh orchids and water pressure that actually worked. But I was grateful. And safe. For now. That weekend I was invited to speak on a national news panel. One of the guests? A former PR director for Leonard Blake's firm. He didn't recognize me at first. But when he did, his eyes narrowed like I was something he scraped off his shoe. "Miss Bennett," he said with a practiced smirk, "don't you think this whole movement is just overreacting?" Mr. Blake was joking. "You've taken it and turned it into a personal campaign." I looked him dead in the eyes. When you live your whole life on the outside of power, what others call jokes we call survival. He didn't make a joke. He made a threat disguised as entertainment. And I responded with truth. He blinked. I continued. "What scares you isn't that I spoke up. It's that people listened." The segment went viral again. And 2 days later, Camille's assistant forwarded me an internal leak. Leonard Blake's board was considering removing him as chairman. His sponsors had started pulling out. Legal pressure was mounting. He was hemorrhaging credibility. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Because until systems change, individuals will just be replaced by another version in a newer suit. But it was a start. And I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The day Leonard Blake showed his face again, I was testifying at a local labor hearing. A small room, maybe 20 people in the audience. A dusty microphone. Fold-out chairs. Nothing grand, just real people trying to fix real problems. I had just finished speaking about non-disclosure agreements and how they're often used to silence workers when I saw him. He was in the back. Dark suit, sunglasses, arms crossed. And when I met his gaze even from across the room, I knew he wasn't there for show. He was watching, waiting, testing me. That night, Camille and Rachel both begged me to take a break, to rest, to go somewhere out of sight for a few days. But I refused. I wasn't hiding. Not anymore. I went back to my diner on a Monday morning just like before. I tied on my apron, poured coffee, refilled creamers. And around 9:45 a.m., she walked in. A woman in her 50s, white blazer, tailored pants, heels that didn't make a sound. She looked like someone who had never in her life had to wait for anything. I recognized her instantly. Evelyn Blake. Leonard's wife. Well, ex-wife now, according to the tabloids. She slid into a booth and waited. Didn't touch the menu. Didn't look at her phone. And when I approached, she looked up. "Miss Bennett," she said, as if she were ordering eggs. "Do you have a moment?" I hesitated. "Then Saturday, I'm not here to threaten you," she began. "I'm not here on Leonard's behalf. In fact, I divorced him the day after that video went viral." I said nothing. She continued. "But I am still tied to the company. And to the lawsuits. And I'm here because I want to talk about accountability. Mine included." That threw me. I expected deflection. Maybe pity. Certainly some backhanded insult. But she looked tired. Human. For once, not behind tinted windows or velvet ropes. "I enabled him," she said quietly. "I watched him climb over people and called it success. And I never asked who got stepped on. I finally found my voice. Why are you here now? Because I think your fight is bigger than you realize. And because I want to help." I blinked. Why would I believe you? She reached into her bag and slid a folder across the table. "Because I brought you this." Inside, copies of private memos, records of internal complaints ignored, emails from HR buried, and a list of NDAs employees silenced after experiencing racism, harassment, or retaliation. My hands trembled as I read. "These are from Leonard's firm," I whispered. Evelyn nodded. "Some of it I saw. Some of it I chose not to see." I looked up. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said. "Only that you use it. I don't deserve redemption. But I want justice. You deserve that." When she left, I sat there for another hour. And then I called Camille. 3 hours later, we were in her office with 2 paralegals and a senior counsel reviewing every page of Evelyn's documents. "This," Camille said, eyes wide, "is the smoking gun." We drafted a new motion that night and filed it the next morning. Now the case wasn't just about Leonard's insults at a restaurant. It was about decades of systemic abuse. The kind that gets people fired, silenced, or driven out. The kind that ruins careers while men like Leonard build empires on their backs. That same week, a woman named Marisol, a former HR rep from Leonard's company, reached out. Then another woman from accounting. Then a man from the tech division. The list grew. One by one, they were ready to speak. And we gave them a space to do it. An online town hall, live-streamed and translated in real time. Thousands tuned in. Stories poured out. Painful, beautiful, unfinished stories from people who had been unseen for far too long. I watched, holding Rachel's hand under the table. "This is what change looks like," she whispered. I nodded. But I also knew. The higher the voices rose, the harder someone would try to silence them. Sure enough, the next morning I woke up to a message. "You've gone too far. Back off or we'll bury you." Attached was a photo of my high school. My little cousin's name. I froze. This was no longer about me. It never really was. The morning after the threat, Camille's apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee I didn't want, staring at the message on my phone. Just 10 words. But they were enough to change the way the light looked in the room. "You've gone too far. Back off or we'll bury you." Attached was a photo of my cousin's school. A zoomed-in shot of her walking out of class. My stomach twisted into something cold and sharp. Camille was on the phone with law enforcement within minutes. They logged the threat. They filed a report. But even she, with all her contacts and calm professionalism, couldn't promise protection. That day, I pulled my cousin from school. I told her mother to take her out of town for a few weeks. We moved my advocacy meetings online. I stopped sleeping in the same place 2 nights in a row. We weren't just making noise anymore. We were hurting someone who'd grown rich off silence. And that made me dangerous. But I refused to stop. That week, I was invited to speak at a university panel titled, Power, Privilege, and the People Who Fight Back. It was me, a young climate activist, a warehouse organizer from Ohio, and a former senator's aide turned whistleblower. I sat on stage under hot lights in a crisp white shirt that didn't quite feel like mine, and told a room full of students what it felt like to become a target for telling the truth. I didn't want to be a symbol, I told them. I just wanted to keep my job and be treated with respect. But when people in power make it clear they don't think you deserve even that, you have 2 choices. Bow your head or lift your voice. Afterward, they lined up to hug me. One girl cried in my arms and said, "I finally reported my manager last week. Because of you." Later that night, Rachel called. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Try me." The National Restaurant Association just issued a formal apology. Public. On their website, they're launching a task force on workplace discrimination and they named you as an inspiration. I almost dropped the phone. Me. Yes, you, Jasmine. The same girl who used to pull doubles and eat cold fries in the back office. You started this. But the truth was I didn't. I just lit a match. The fire came from everyone else. Camille and I held a press conference 2 days later. Standing outside the courthouse, flanked by lawyers and allies, I read a statement aloud. This isn't about revenge. This is about reform. About making sure no girl like me has to swallow her pride just to keep a paycheck. About holding powerful people accountable for the harm they do behind closed doors. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. And we are not alone. The applause was loud, but so were the consequences. That night, someone vandalized the diner. Spray paint across the windows. Fake victim. Race hustler. Shut up. Rachel called me at midnight in tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault. I should have never." "No," I said, cutting her off. "This isn't your fault. This is what happens when power feels threatened." We hired more security. We reopened 2 days later with new glass and a new sign above the counter. Dignity served here. People lined up down the block. Not just to eat but to stand. To say, "We see you." To show that they weren't scared either. And then finally the court hearing came. The suit Leonard Blake had filed against me for malicious defamation was scheduled for dismissal. Camille walked into that courtroom like a queen. Her briefcase full of every memo, every recorded insult, every buried complaint that Evelyn Blake had turned over. Leonard didn't even show up. His lawyer tried to speak, but the judge stopped him. "There's nothing here," she said. "You're using the courts to silence a citizen who told the truth. That stops today." Dismissed. Just like that. Outside, the reporters swarmed. "Ms. Bennett. Jasmine. What's next?" I looked into the cameras and said, "Next? We build. We train. We protect the next girl before she has to fight this battle alone." Later that evening, back at Camille's place, I finally exhaled. Not relief, not yet, but something like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That night I got another message. But this one was different. It was from a man named Malik, a dishwasher in New Jersey. He wrote, "We saw what you did. I told my whole kitchen staff your story. We watched the video together. And now we're organizing too." I sat in bed holding my phone and cried for the first time in weeks. Not out of fear, but because I realized something: they couldn't bury me. Not anymore. By the time Leonard Blake finally broke his silence, it was too late. He sat down for a primetime interview with a carefully chosen news anchor, in a sleek gray suit and a practiced expression of remorse. The set was dimly lit, dramatic, cinematic. A man rebranding himself. "I made mistakes," he said, voice even, eyes glassy. "But I've also been misunderstood." Misunderstood? He humiliated me in public. He threatened me in private. He tried to silence a movement. And now he wanted forgiveness without ever asking me for it. Camille and I watched the broadcast from her living room. She crossed her arms. He's laying the foundation for a comeback. I nodded. Redemption Tour 101. But what Leonard hadn't accounted for was that the world had changed since he last controlled the narrative. And this time I had a louder mic. The next day, I was invited to respond on national radio. When the host asked me, "What do you think of Mr. Blake's apology?" I smiled softly and said, "It's easy to apologize when the cameras are rolling, but real accountability isn't something you script. It's something you live." That quote spread like wildfire. Even Leonard's former allies started distancing themselves. Corporate partners pulled their support. Boards he once chaired held emergency votes. One by one, the pillars of his empire crumbled. By the end of the week, Leonard Blake resigned from his remaining public posts. He released a final statement: "No press, no cameras," just a typed paragraph that read more like surrender than repentance. Some people celebrated, but I didn't feel joy. I felt tired, because it was never about bringing him down. It was about lifting others up. And that fight was far from over. 2 weeks later, we held our first National Worker Dignity Summit. We flew in voices from all corners of the country. Farmhands, baristas, factory workers, delivery drivers. We held panels on wage theft, workplace harassment, and mental health in high-stress jobs. And Jasmine Bennett, opened the summit with a keynote speech. Standing behind a podium in a room packed with 500 people, I looked out at the sea of faces and said, "I didn't plan to become an activist. I planned to pay my rent. I planned to survive. But when someone tried to strip me of my dignity in front of the world, I had a choice: stay small or stand tall. And I chose to stand. But I didn't stand alone. Every person who sent a message, every worker who spoke out, every ally who used their privilege to amplify this cause, you stood with me. And today we keep standing. For better pay. For safe workspaces. For truth. For dignity that doesn't have to be earned, because it was always ours to begin with." They gave me a standing ovation. I don't remember walking off stage, but I remember hugging Camille so tightly backstage that neither of us could breathe. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said, voice shaking. "We did." That night I visited the diner again. No press. No cameras. Just me. Rachel saved me a seat at the counter. We shared a piece of warm pie and some decaf. "I don't know how you stayed standing through all of it," she said. I smiled. "Because if I fell, too many others would have fallen with me." She nodded slowly, then handed me something. A little white envelope. Inside was a business license. The name on it? Jasmine Bennett Community Equity Center. "You're opening your own space," she said. "A place for education, training, healing. And I've already paid the first year's rent." I stared at her, speechless. She just shrugged. "You lit the fire. I'm just helping it spread." The next morning, I walked past the mirror in Camille's hallway. I stopped. I looked at myself. Not just the waitress. Not just the woman in the video. But a leader. A builder. A woman who faced a storm and didn't bend. And for the first time, I whispered to my reflection, "You belong." The Jasmine Bennett Community Equity Center opened on a rainy Saturday in March. We held the ribbon cutting inside a converted warehouse with exposed brick, second-hand desks, and a wall-sized mural painted by local artists. It showed a line of workers, different faces, races, uniforms, standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes forward. Above them were the words, "Stand for one, rise with all." The line stretched around the block. People showed up from every corner of the city. Cooks in oil-stained shirts. Nannies with strollers. High schoolers. Union reps. Even 2 retired teachers who'd driven in from out of state just to shake my hand. A woman hugged me so tightly I almost lost my breath. "My daughter watches every video you post," she whispered. "She says you make her feel brave." I smiled. She already is. Inside, our team had set up booths, legal aid, workplace rights education, trauma counseling, and job training. It wasn't perfect. We were underfunded, overwhelmed, and running mostly on donated time. But we were open. And that meant everything. That week, I got a message from Alyssa, the hotel worker from our first workshop. She had just been promoted to assistant manager at a different hotel chain. "They found out I stood up for myself," she wrote, "and they hired me because of it." I cried. Again. Not from fear this time, From the kind of joy that feels like healing. But it didn't last long. Because the higher you climb, the clearer the shots. 2 days later, I got a cease and desist letter from one of Leonard Blake's former executives, now running his own spin-off firm. They claimed our summit had defamed the company. They demanded I take down all video footage from our live stream. Camille read the letter, rolled her eyes and said, "They're just hoping you'll be too tired to fight." I was tired, but I was also fueled by every name in our volunteer registry, every story on our wall, every inbox message that began with, "You don't know me, but..." So we responded. Not just legally but publicly. We uploaded a new video. We're not afraid. It featured testimony from workers who had spoken at the summit. Clips of them, faces uncovered, voices clear. "We've been quiet long enough," one said. "No more silence," another added. By the end of the week it had 3.1 million views. Donations to the center doubled. So did the threats. This time they weren't anonymous. A local business owner posted a photo of me with the caption, "This woman wants to destroy American small business." Right underneath, someone commented, "She better pray someone doesn't teach her a lesson the hard way." Camille insisted we increase security again. Rachel showed up the next day with pepper spray, 2 walkie-talkies, and a taser. "This is not how we imagine changing the world," I told her. "No," she said. "But it's how we protect the ones who do." Then came the hardest part. My father called me. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. He was old school. Believed in respect, silence, and never causing a scene. When the video of Leonard first went viral, he texted once, "I hope you know what you're doing." And that was it. Until now. He left a voicemail. "Jasmine, I saw you on the news again. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I don't say that enough. Maybe I never have. But you're doing what I never had the courage to." I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, heart full of something too big to name. I saved that message. I still listen to it on hard days. A few weeks later, we launched our first scholarship fund. It was small, just enough to help 3 young women take evening classes while working. But it was real. It was something I could touch, hold, give. One of the recipients, a 19-year-old grocery store cashier named Nyla, cried when we handed her the letter. "I thought people like you forgot about people like us," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "I am people like you." That night, as I left the center, I saw someone waiting outside. Not a reporter. Not a protester. A young man in a hoodie, hands in his pockets. He stepped forward slowly. "Miss Bennett." "Yes. I just wanted to say thanks. You stood up to someone everyone else bowed down to. You made me believe I could fight back too." I smiled. "Are you?" He nodded. "Starting tomorrow." Then he turned and walked away. The street was quiet again. But inside me, a roar. Because I realized the truth. I wasn't just fighting to protect myself anymore. I was fighting to protect the fire. It came in a simple white envelope. No return address. No flashy logo. Just my name written in blue ink, Jasmine Bennett. Like someone took their time. It had been a long day. I just finished a seminar at the Center on Recognizing Workplace Retaliation, and I was exhausted. The kind of tired that lived in your bones. I almost didn't open it that night. But something told me I should. Inside was a handwritten letter. Neat script. Careful punctuation. "Dear Ms. Bennett, I don't expect you to remember me. But I was there the day Mr. Blake insulted you in the diner. Table 4. I watched it all. I didn't record it. I didn't speak up. I just watched. I want you to know that I've thought about that day every single week since it happened. You were brave. I wasn't. But watching you now, what you've built, what you've stood for has changed me. Yesterday, I reported my own company for falsifying employee injury records. It won't make headlines. But it mattered. Because of you. Thank you for being the voice I couldn't find in that moment. Sincerely, a silent witness." I sat down on the floor. Not the chair. Not the couch. The floor. Because sometimes the weight of grace is heavier than anger. That letter didn't make me feel proud. It made me feel human again. For the first time in a long time, I stopped fighting the tears. The next morning, I brought the letter to Rachel. We sat at the counter of the diner, our diner, with 2 cups of black coffee and a laminated menu between us. She read it twice. then placed it down gently. "You know what this means, right?" she said. "That someone saw me? That someone finally saw themselves in you." Later that week, we got news from Camille. The Department of Labor was officially launching an investigation into Leonard Blake's former firm, thanks in part to the documents Evelyn gave us. They were interviewing over 30 employees. Some of them were now volunteers at our center. Some had become community organizers in their own cities. Some were just learning to breathe again. Camille smiled across her desk and said, "It's happening. The system's actually shaking." And it was. Leonard himself had all but disappeared from the public eye. His properties were being sold off. His assets frozen. The firm had a new CEO, a new name, and a new internal policy program they were very eager to advertise. "I don't care if they rebrand," I told Camille, "as long as they rebuild the right way." She nodded. "We'll be watching." That Saturday, something unexpected happened. I was honored with a civic medal at the mayor's banquet. I stood on a stage in front of officials and activists and strangers in evening gowns. But when they called my name, I almost didn't move. Because I wasn't used to being celebrated without a fight. Rachel squeezed my hand. Camille nudged me gently. And I walked up, took the small gold medal and whispered, "Thank you." My speech was short. Honest. This isn't just about me. This is about every woman who smiled through cruelty just to keep her job. Every worker who swallowed their truth because no one would believe them. I was never the loudest. But I refused to be silent. And now the silence is broken. They stood and clapped. But I only saw one face in the crowd. An elderly black woman in a floral dress. She had tears in her eyes and her hand on her chest. I never learned her name. But I carry her look with me still. That night, as I walked home with my medal in my bag, I saw something painted across the side of the building across from the diner. A mural. Of me. Not glamorous. Not heroic. Just real. In my waitress apron. Holding a tray. Back straight. Eyes forward. And next to it, in bold block letters, "Speak. Stand. Stay." I froze. Rachel stepped beside me. "We didn't commission it. A local artist painted it after watching your summit." I stared at it, stunned. I thought about that first day. Tray in my hands, heart in my throat, Leonard's voice slicing through the air. And I whispered something out loud I never thought I'd say. Maybe it was all worth it. It's been 1 year since the video. 1 year since a powerful man tried to reduce me to a stereotype and got the world's attention instead. And in that year I've been called everything. Brave, arrogant, dangerous, revolutionary, naive, loud, inspiring. But do you want to know what mattered most? When my niece looked up at me one night and said, "Auntie Jasmine, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." That was the moment I stopped questioning whether I'd done the right thing. The Jasmine Bennett Community Equity Center now has 3 locations. We're not just hosting workshops anymore. We're writing policy proposals, partnering with labor unions, speaking at schools. Every month we publish a spotlight story. One voice, one experience, because everyone deserves to be heard, not just the ones with cameras on them. And sometimes I go back to the diner, not because I have to, because I want to, because every movement needs a reminder of where it started. Rachel still runs the place, and now the walls are lined with framed photos, not of celebrities but of workers. Waitresses, janitors, clerks, cooks. People who got up every day and carried the world quietly. The media eventually moved on. The internet found new scandals. Leonard Blake? He lives in quiet exile somewhere in upstate New York. He issued another apology through a PR firm. No one cared. His name became a warning, not a brand. Some say I ruined him. I say he revealed himself. I just stood still long enough for the world to see. Camille became more than my lawyer. She became family. She co-founded a legal aid program with me called Open Hands, Closed Fists because sometimes we extend peace and sometimes we fight for it. Rachel's been nominated for a National Leadership Award. She still calls me every Tuesday morning just to check in, and sometimes just to say, "You're doing good, girl." And me? Well, I'm still not used to stages. Still not comfortable in designer shoes. Still not sure how to respond when strangers say I'm a hero. But I've learned this. You don't have to be loud to start a revolution. You just have to speak when it matters. And I did. The last time I visited Howard University, they gave me a tour of the new student center. There's a wall in one hallway, etched with names of alumni who sparked change. Someone pointed to mine and said, "That's you." And for the first time I didn't shrink from it. I stood there, straight-backed, unapologetic, and I smiled. Later that night, walking home, a breeze brushed through my jacket, and I remembered the first words my mother ever told me about dignity. It's not something you earn, something you protect, even when no one's watching. Well, now they're watching, and they'll keep watching, not because of what I did, but because of what we did together. And when the next girl is mocked or underestimated or told to stay small, she'll have a story to point to, and maybe she'll whisper to herself, "If Jasmine could stand up, maybe I can too." That's the echo that stays.